I still remember that night like it happened yesterday. The sound of glasses clinking, soft jazz in the background, the kind of murmur that fills a wedding banquet when everyone's waiting for the big toast. I was walking in with Michael, my soon-to-be husband, hand in hand, nervous but proud. And then it happened. My father leaned back in his chair, chuckled, and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Army, that's nothing. She's a disgrace." The music didn't stop, but it might as well have. Forks froze midair. My heart dropped into my stomach. I swear I could hear the ice cubes shifting in someone's glass across the room. That's how silent it became. You know that moment when someone rips the floor out from under you? When the people you expect to protect you are the ones who stab you? Yeah, that's what it felt like. I looked at Michael, panic flashing across my eyes. Should we walk out? Should I shout back? Should I pretend I didn't hear? And then Michael stood up. He didn't hesitate. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "She's the reason I'm still alive." Everyone turned. Gasps around the room. My father's smirk vanished, but he didn't answer. He just stared, jaw tight, eyes burning. I can still feel the weight of that silence pressing on my chest. It wasn't just humiliation, it was betrayal. How do you explain that the man who raised you, who should have been proud, decided to tear you down in front of everyone you loved? Tell me, have you ever been rejected by the very person you wanted to impress most? Have you felt that sting? That's the question that haunted me in that moment. I could see Michael's hand trembling slightly as he held his glass. He wasn't lying. He wasn't saying it for effect. He meant it, every single word. And it left the room wondering, what did he mean? Why would he say she saved his life? That was the loop. That was the question hanging in the air like smoke. How did we get here? I could feel my cheeks burning, but not from shame, from rage, from disbelief. From the fire that had been building for years. Around us, relatives whispered. Some avoided eye contact. Others looked at me with pity, as if I was the wounded one who needed saving. But here's the truth. I wasn't broken. Not then. Not anymore. But in that room, in that split second, it all collided. My past, my scars, my father's cruelty, and Michael's truth. I wanted to scream, "Do you even know what I went through? Do you know what I survived?" But instead, I stayed still. Sometimes silence screams louder than words, and maybe that's why his comment hurt so much, because silence was the weapon he had always used against me. Years of cold shoulders, years of absence, years of pretending my choices didn't matter. And now he decided to weaponize words too, but Michael broke that silence. He shattered it. "She's the reason I'm still alive." The echo of his voice carried far beyond that room. And I know you're wondering, why would he say that? What happened between us that made those words more than just a dramatic defense? That night, as I stood there, the question burned hotter than any humiliation. How did it come to this? Stick with me, because the story behind those words is darker, harder, and heavier than you might think. And once you hear it, you'll never forget. When I close my eyes and think back, I can still smell the faint scent of lilies from the funeral home. My mom loved lilies. She said they reminded her of hope, even in dark times. I was 16 when she passed. The room was filled with mourners, soft prayers, the muffled cries of women holding tissues. But my father? Frank sat stiff, jaw tight, eyes locked straight ahead. No tears, no words. Just a silence that felt colder than the grave we were lowering her into. That silence stayed with me. It followed me home, into a house that felt hollow, every corner echoing with what used to be her laughter. I would walk into the kitchen and half expect to see her at the stove, humming. Instead, I'd find Frank sitting at the table, reading the newspaper, as if nothing had changed. If he was grieving, he hid it under stone. If he was hurting, he let it rot inside without letting me in. And me? I was just a girl desperate for someone to say, "It's okay. We'll get through this together." But those words never came. Maybe you know what that feels like. Losing not just one parent, but in a way, losing the other too. I tried to talk to him. Once, I sat down and asked, "Dad, do you miss her?" He didn't look up. He just flipped the page of his paper and muttered, "Don't be dramatic. Dramatic. That's what he called grief. That's what he called love. So I built walls of my own. But unlike him, my walls weren't stone. Mine were built on action. I threw myself into school, into sports, into anything that reminded me I was alive. And somewhere in that chaos, I found myself drawn to the idea of the army. Not for glory, not for medals, for structure, for meaning. For the chance to be stronger than the silence that swallowed our house whole. When I told Frank, he laughed. Not the belly laugh of someone who's amused. No, it was sharp, short, dismissive. The army? That's a waste. You'll never make it. You'll quit. Do you know what it feels like to have your dream laughed at by the one person you wish would clap the loudest? That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my fists clenched. His words weren't just skepticism, they were a challenge. And I wasn't about to let him win, so I signed up. He didn't come with me to the recruiter's office. He didn't ask about my physical test, my paperwork, or my nerves. He just scoffed and said, "Don't expect me to bail you out when you fail." Fail, that's the word he clung to. And maybe deep down, that's why I pushed harder, to prove him wrong, to prove myself right, to fill the silence with something louder than his disdain. But there was something else too. Losing Mom left me with this hole. You can't patch a hole like that with comfort food or casual talks with friends. You patch it with something bigger than yourself. You patch it with a mission. That's what the army was for me, a mission, a way to become unbreakable when everything inside felt shattered. I remember packing my duffel bag the night before basic training. My hands shook as I folded my clothes, but my heart? It burned. My mom's photo was the last thing I tucked inside. Frank walked by, paused at the door, glanced at me for half a second, and said nothing. Then he turned away. "No, good luck. No, I'm proud." Nothing. Just the echo of footsteps fading down the hall. And maybe you're wondering, did that break me? No. It lit a fire. His silence, his dismissal, his coldness, they all became fuel. If love wouldn't come from him, then respect would. And if not respect, then proof. Proof that I could stand where others fell. Proof that I wasn't a failure, no matter how many times he predicted it. But here's the thing. Every time he dismissed me, every time he looked right through me, I still craved his approval. That's the cruel irony of a child and a parent. You can hate the way they hurt you, but you never stop wanting them to see you, to really see you. Even now, years later, standing in that wedding hall, when he mocked me in front of everyone, that old ache came rushing back. The same ache I felt at 16, watching him sit stone-faced at Mom's funeral. The same ache when he called me dramatic. The same ache when he told me I'd fail. It never really leaves you, does it? That shadow of childhood. It follows you into adulthood, into marriages, into wars. You can bury it under medals and uniforms, but when the man who cast that shadow speaks, it all rises again. And maybe that's why I joined the army, to fight shadows. His, mine, all of them. So when you hear Michael say, "She's the reason I'm alive," don't just think of battlefields and bombs. Think of the quiet battles too. The ones fought in kitchens where fathers never look up from newspapers. The ones fought in bedrooms where daughters cry into pillows, unheard. Because those battles, They shape you just as much as the war zones do. Have you ever carried a shadow like that? A shadow so heavy it makes you fight harder, just to prove you're more than the darkness behind you? That was my life. That was my childhood. And it was only the beginning. The first day of basic training smelled like sweat, mud, and fear. We were all lined up, bags at our feet, trying to look tougher than we felt. The drill sergeant's voice cracked across the field like a whip. "You think you're strong?" "You're nothing. Prove it." And I remember thinking, fine. I've been proving myself my whole life. What's one more battle? The morning started at 4:30. The bugle call ripped you out of whatever restless sleep you managed. Boots hit the floor in unison, the air heavy with curses and groans. Cold showers, rushed shaves, chow hall meals that tasted more like fuel than food. Every moment was a test. Could you run faster, carry more, push harder than the person next to you? I was one of the few women in my unit. That alone put a spotlight on me. Every stumble, every hesitation was magnified. I could see it in their eyes, waiting for me to break, waiting to confirm their doubts. I refused. There was this one drill, endless push-ups under a blazing sun. My arms trembled, sweat dripping into the dirt. The guy next to me muttered, "She's gonna drop any second." I locked eyes with him, gripped my teeth, and pushed until my elbows locked straight, again and again and again. That's when I earned the nickname Rock, solid, unmoving. Do you know what it feels like to have a name stick to you because you refuse to break? It's both a burden and a badge. Training wasn't just physical. It was mental warfare. The nights were the worst. Lying in the barracks, muscles screaming, the snores of exhausted bodies around me, doubts whispering in my head. What if Dad was right? What if I fail? But then I'd hear his voice again. "It's a waste." And that turned fear into fuel. Graduation came, but it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Orders came down. Deployment, Afghanistan. A place where dust clung to your skin, where the horizon shimmered with heat, and where every step might be your last. I'll never forget the smell of that place. Sand, diesel, gunpowder. You learn to taste tension in the air. You learn to keep your weapon close, your head lower, your trust tighter. It was there I met Michael, not in some romantic movie way. We were thrown together, strangers bound by survival. He was all sharp edges and quiet determination. At first, he was just another soldier. But in war, bonds form fast. You see someone save your life once, and they stop being a stranger. The day that changed everything came under a sky so bright it almost mocked us. We were on patrol, heat waves rising off the dirt road. Then, boom! The ground shook. Dust swallowed the air. An IED had gone off, the kind of explosion that tears time apart. Ears ringing, vision blurred. I remember one thing. Michael wasn't moving. He was on the ground, chest rising too shallow, blood staining his uniform. My body moved before my mind caught up. I dropped to my knees, pulled him to cover, hands slick with his blood. Gunfire cracked in the distance, shouts all around. But my focus tunneled to one thing: keep him alive. I pressed my hands against his wound, whispering, "Stay with me. You're not dying today." Do you know the smell of blood mixed with sand? Metallic, earthy, unforgettable. That smell clings. It crawls into your skin. My training kicked in. Tourniquet, pressure, call for medevac. Minutes stretched like hours. Michael's eyes flickered open once, glassy but fighting. He croaked, "Don't! Let me go!" I didn't. When the helicopter blades finally thumped overhead, when they loaded him onto that stretcher, I collapsed beside the Humvee, dirt sticking to the sweat on my face. My arms shook, but not from exhaustion, from adrenaline, from terror, from the weight of what almost was. That day Michael didn't die. He lived. And later, when he said in that wedding hall, She's the reason I'm still alive." He wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't being poetic. He was remembering this moment. War burns you. It carves scars you can't see. But it also forges bonds that nothing, not even a father's cruel words, can erase. I carried the nickname Rock into every mission after that. Not because I felt invincible, but because I knew others leaned on me, and leaning gave me strength. Tell me, have you ever felt the weight of someone else's survival resting in your hands? Have you ever realized that your actions in one breath could decide if another heart keeps beating? That's war. That's what Frank never understood. And that's the truth behind Michael's words. The silence after Michael's words still clung to the room. My father's face froze, the lines around his mouth pulled tight, his pride shaken for the first time I could ever remember. Guests shifted in their seats, whispers threading through the air like restless bees. My heart pounded, not with triumph, but with fear. Fear that even this moment, even Michael risking his soul in front of everyone, wouldn't be enough to move Frank. And yet, something had cracked. That night, after the reception ended, I sat alone in my hotel room, dress draped over the chair, mascara smudged under tired eyes. I replayed it all. The look on Michael's face when he spoke, the gasp that rippled through the hall, and my father's silence. My phone buzzed with message after message from friends and fellow soldiers who'd been at the wedding. "Proud of you." About time someone said it. "Stay strong." But nothing from Frank. Until the next morning, I woke to an email. The subject line was a single word: "Sorry." My hand trembled as I clicked it open. The body wasn't long. Just a few lines, awkward, clipped, not his usual commanding tone. He admitted he hadn't known how to handle me, that his own fear had twisted into contempt. He wrote, "I should have been proud. Instead, I turned my back. That's on me." And at the bottom, a line I'd never seen from him before. "Your mother would have been proud. Forgive me if you can. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh." The man who had once sneered at my choice of life, who had said, "Army, that's nothing," was now reaching out. It wasn't absolution, but it was a start. Weeks passed. We didn't talk much, but there was a shift. A door cracked open, a sliver of light sneaking through. Then came the invitation. An event at the local Veterans Memorial. A ceremony honoring those who had served. I almost didn't go. Part of me thought it would be another trap for disappointment. But Michael urged me, "You've faced worse. Face this." The day of the ceremony, the sky was a wide stretch of blue, crisp air carrying the faint sound of a bugle warming up. Rows of flags lined the entrance, their fabric snapping in the breeze. My chest tightened as I walked up the steps, my uniform crisp, my medals catching the light, and then I saw them, my old unit. One by one they appeared, lining the walkway, men and women I had sweated with, bled with, prayed with. They stood shoulder to shoulder, boots aligned, eyes locked on me. And then, as if on cue, they raised their hands in salute. The sound of their boots striking in unison echoed like thunder in my chest. My vision blurred, tears threatening to spill. This wasn't just respect. It was recognition. It was a living wall of proof that I was not invisible, that what I had given mattered. From the corner of my eye, I saw him. Frank stood at the far end, hands clenched, face unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might turn away. But then, slowly, almost painfully, he raised his hand. His salute was sharp, practiced, but his eyes betrayed him, wet, raw, breaking. Flashbacks collided in my mind. Him telling me it was a waste, him turning his back as I boarded the bus to basic training, him sneering at my uniform, and now, him saluting me. The same man who had mocked me in front of family and friends was finally, wordlessly, giving me the one thing I'd wanted all along. Acknowledgement. The crowd's applause swelled, but I barely heard it. My knees almost buckled under the weight of the moment. Michael squeezed my shoulder, grounding me. The world blurred into sound and color, but I felt the truth settle inside me. For the first time, my father saw me, not as a disappointment, not as a reckless girl chasing a dream, but as his daughter, a soldier, someone worth respect. That night back at home, I opened his email again. I read the words differently now. They weren't just apologies. They were an opening, a promise of something fragile but real, a second chance. Tell me, have you ever waited years, decades even, for someone you love to finally say the words you needed all along? Have you ever felt the bittersweet relief of being seen after so long in the dark? That was my moment. That was the beginning of something new, even if it came late. Recognition, however delayed, can still heal, and sometimes that's enough to keep moving forward. The wedding was over, but the glow still lingered. We'd moved into the hall for the after party. Laughter bounced off the walls, glasses clinked, music spilled from the speakers, soft enough for conversation but loud enough to feel celebratory. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. The weight of my father's harsh words, the tension of the ceremony, it all seemed like it was finally behind me. Friends circled us, raising toasts. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, his thumb brushing over my skin like a reminder that we had survived more than war to be here. Even Frank was quieter, less combative. He sat with a distant look, as though he was still processing. I didn't know what it meant, but I held on to the hope that maybe the wall between us had finally begun to crumble. And then she appeared. At first, I thought she was just another guest who had wandered in late. A woman in her 30s, dark hair pulled back neatly, a sharpness in her eyes that caught mine from across the room. She didn't smile. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight toward our table with a determination that set my nerves on edge. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady but loud enough to draw attention. Conversations nearby dimmed. Chairs creaked as people turned to look. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I have something to say." My fork froze midair. Something in me knew this wasn't going to be good. She glanced at Frank first. His face drained of color the instant their eyes met. And in that silence, the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Then she said it. "I'm his daughter, too." The words cracked through the hall like glass shattering on marble. You ever had the ground vanish under your feet? That moment where sound dulls, air thickens, and all you can hear is your own heartbeat hammering in your ears? That's what it felt like. The music cut abruptly, someone rushing to turn it off. The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at her, blinking, trying to piece together what I had just heard. My father's daughter? My half-sister? She didn't flinch. She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn photo. It was of Frank, years younger, arm slung casually around a woman I didn't recognize. And there she was, too. This woman. Just a child then, standing between them. Gasps rippled through the guests. I could feel every eye burning into us. Frank's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists on the table. "Not here," he muttered, his voice low but shaking, but it was too late. The room already knew. I looked back at her. She wasn't trembling, though her lips pressed into a thin line like she was holding back years of swallowed words. Her eyes flicked toward me, softening. "I didn't come here to ruin your day, but you deserve to know the truth." My throat went dry. My stomach churned, a knot twisting tighter and tighter. This was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. But in an instant, it had turned into something else. A stage for secrets I never asked to uncover. Michael's hand gripped mine, grounding me, but even he looked stunned, eyes darting between Frank and the stranger. And my father? He just sat there, silent, his face ashen, his shoulders hunched. For a man who always had words, sharp, dismissive, cold, he suddenly had none. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. Instead, all I managed was a whisper. Is this true? But Frank didn't look at me. He kept his eyes locked on the table, refusing to meet my gaze. And that silence told me more than words ever could. Have you ever realized your family isn't what you thought it was? That the roots you believed were solid are tangled, hidden, rotten in places no one spoke about? That's the moment I lived right then. The guests shifted uncomfortably, whispers buzzing again. Some avoided looking at me, others stared with open pity. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. She didn't back down. Her voice cut through the murmurs, calm but firm. I'm not here to shame anyone. I just couldn't stay invisible anymore. Her words sliced through me. Invisible. That word had been the shadow of my entire life with Frank. And now I was staring at someone else who had lived in that same shadow. The room stayed frozen, waiting, watching. My heart thundered, my breath shallow. I felt like the walls were closing in. Do you know that feeling? When one truth pulls the thread and suddenly everything you've ever believed about your family begins to unravel? That's where I was. On my wedding night. The room didn't settle after her words. If anything, it grew heavier. The air pressed down on me like a storm rolling in, thick, suffocating, impossible to escape. I looked at my father, waiting, begging for him to deny it, to laugh, to say it was some twisted mistake. But instead, his lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw locked, his eyes fixed anywhere but mine. That silence was louder than any confession. Tell them, I finally said. My voice cracked, but it carried. Tell me she's lying. He shook his head slightly, more a twitch than a gesture, then muttered, Not now, not here. Not now, not here? Those words dug into me like claws. This was my wedding night, the one day where truth was supposed to feel safe, and suddenly it was anything but. The woman didn't hesitate. I served 2 Army reserves. I learned to survive silence. But tonight, I won't be silent anymore. Her eyes burned as they flicked from me to Frank. I grew up hearing my mother's stories about him, about promises, about abandonment. Do you think I wanted to be here? Do you think I wanted to ruin her day? But someone has to say it. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. All my life, I'd fought for acknowledgement from the man who stood right in front of me. And now here she was, another daughter, another soldier, fighting the same war. I turned to my father again. Is it true? This time, his voice broke. It's complicated. Complicated. That single word sent a surge of anger through me. Complicated? I bled for your name. I carried your disapproval like armor. And all this time, you had another child? The crowd murmured, shifting. Phones lit up as whispers spread. Guests exchanged glances, thumbs moving quickly. Posting, texting. The story was already leaving the room before it had even ended inside it. Michael's hand squeezed mine, but even he looked lost, helpless. My world wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. And then came the blow I didn't expect. The stranger, my half-sister, looked at me with something almost tender. Your mother knew, she said softly. The words hit harder than any shout. I froze. No, I whispered, shaking my head. She knew, the woman repeated, firmer now. My mother told me. She said your mom accepted it. She stayed quiet because she loved him. Because she wanted your family to stay whole, the room spun. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. My mother, my anchor, my memory of warmth, had carried this truth in silence, had loved me while knowing I wasn't the only one. Stop, I begged, my voice raw. But the truth didn't stop. It poured out like a flood that had been dammed for decades. Frank's face crumpled. guilt etched into every line. She didn't deserve the pain. I thought, if we buried it, it would die. Did it? I shot back, my voice rising. Did burying it kill it? Or did it just rot until tonight? I could hear the gasps, the soft weeping of some guests, but none of it mattered. My heart was pounding too hard, my blood boiling too fast. Do you know what it feels like when your whole history is rewritten in one breath? When the people you loved become strangers in an instant? That's what it felt like. The woman's voice cracked now, emotion spilling through. I didn't come here to take anything from you. I came because I couldn't carry it alone anymore. And suddenly, I saw her not as an intruder, but as a mirror. Another daughter of silence. Another victim of Frank's cowardice. But it didn't soften the blow, it doubled it. Because if she was invisible all her life, then what was I? Frank tried again, weakly. I made mistakes. I thought I was protecting everyone. I cut him off. Protecting who? Yourself? The hall was silent except for the faint buzz of a phone notification pinging in the corner. The story was already out there. People online were going to know before I even processed it myself. And that's when the question burned through me like fire. Is silence love? Was my mother's silence love? Was my father's silence protection? Or was it just cowardice dressed up as care? The stakes shifted. It wasn't just about a secret child. It was about my entire foundation, my identity, my family's truth. And now, in front of everyone, that foundation had shattered. I looked around the room, at the eyes on me, waiting for me to break, to lash out, to crumble. But I stayed standing, even if my knees shook, even if my voice wavered, because someone had to. Enough, I said, louder now, steadying my breath. If this family is going to survive, it won't survive on silence anymore. And in that moment, I knew there was no going back. The auditorium was buzzing before we even walked in. Veterans in pressed uniforms, families with hands folded tight in their laps, flags hanging from the rafters. It wasn't just another gathering. This was a ceremony of recognition. A place where names were spoken out loud, where sacrifice was honored in public. And that night, it became the place where my family's silence was finally broken. I stood at the edge of the stage, palms sweating, heart thudding like it wanted to burst through my chest. Michael squeezed my shoulder gently before stepping back into the shadows. He knew this was mine to carry. My father stood a few feet away, stiff in his blazer, jaw locked, his eyes darting anywhere but toward the crowd. He'd agreed to come, but it looked like the hardest walk he'd ever made. And beside me, her, the woman who'd shattered the illusion. The sister I never asked for but could no longer deny. She stood tall, shoulders back, the weight of her truth clear on her face. The announcer tapped the microphone, voice echoing, "Tonight we honor those who've served and those who've stood behind them." My throat tightened. This was it. I stepped forward. "Before we begin," I said, my voice trembling but clear, "there's something I need to say. Something my family needs to say." The crowd hushed. You could hear the air shift. "For years," I continued, "I believed recognition was earned in blood, in sacrifice, in proving yourself again and again. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I was strong enough, if I fought hard enough, my father would finally see me. But the truth is, recognition doesn't come from war. It comes from honesty." I paused, then turned toward him. "Dad, tonight isn't about medals or ranks. It's about facing the truth." The spotlight seemed to pin him to the floor. For a second, I thought he'd bolt. But then slowly he stepped forward. His face crumpled. His hands shook. "I was wrong," he whispered, the microphone catching every crack in his voice. "I thought silence protected us. I thought hiding mistakes kept us safe. But all it did was wound the people I love most." gasps rippled through the crowd. Some leaned forward, some wiped tears. My heart pounded harder, but not with rage this time, with release. He turned, looking first at me, then at her. "You are both my daughters." And I should have said it years ago. I should have shown it. His voice broke completely. "I am sorry." For the first time in my life, I heard the words I'd been fighting for. Not perfect, not clean, but real. The audience rose. Applause thundered, some veterans saluting in solidarity. And there I was, standing between the two halves of my family, two halves that had never been allowed to meet until now. I reached for her hand. For a moment she hesitated, then she took it. Her grip was strong, steady. I looked at my father. Recognition isn't about titles or bloodlines or silence. It's about courage. The courage to face what's real, no matter how ugly. Tonight, we faced it, together. The applause swelled again, louder this time. Flags waved, camera flashes went off, but all I felt was a weight lifting off my chest. As we stepped down from the stage, I glanced at the faces in the crowd. Some were nodding, some were crying, some were whispering, maybe thinking about their own families, their own silences. And I knew then that this wasn't just my story. It was bigger. Because who hasn't carried a silence that hurt more than it healed? So let me ask you, if it were you, would you face the truth? Would you risk breaking the silence for the chance to finally be whole? Because recognition, real recognition, only begins there.